This is notes page 11-7. So we are going to continue working with radicals. Every time you work with radicals, you will have to simplify, which is what it says in step 3. So our steps are to multiply your coefficients, your outside numbers, and then you multiply the inside numbers. So the square root of A times the square root of B, we go the opposite direction and split it up, but now you're going to put them together. So anything that's under the square root can be multiplied together, and everything that's on the outside can be multiplied together. So I kind of like to do A square root of B times C square root of D will be A times C on the outside and B times D on the inside. So multiply your outside numbers together, multiply your inside numbers together. Then you will need to simplify the inside number if you can. So if we look at number 1, there is no coefficient in the first one. If you want to think of it as a 1, you can. So 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. Square root 8 times 2 is 16. Well, 16 is a perfect square. The square root of 16 is just 4. So this is multiplication. 3 times 4 gives us negative 12 as our final answer. So sometimes you will get an actual integer for your answer rather than a radical. Number 2, technically we have a 1 and a negative 1 as our coefficients, so that's just a negative 1, so a negative sign. Square root 3 times 2 is 6. There are no perfect squares that go into 6, so negative square root of 6 is our final answer. Number 3, here we have stuff in all 4 spots. So 2 on the outside, 5 times negative 7 is negative 35. Square root 10 times 12 is 120. So 120 is a big number, but 4 is actually the biggest perfect square that will go into it. So 120 is 4 times 30. Square root, square root. The square root of 4 becomes 2. So negative 35 times 2 gives us negative 70 on the outside, and then square root of 30 goes with it. Number 4, we have a negative 4 times 2 to give us negative 8. Square root 14 times 8 is 112. So again, you need to find the biggest perfect square that goes into 112. That would be 16. This is 16 times 7. Square root, square root. The square root of 16 would become 4. So negative 8 times 4 gives me negative 32, square root of 7. So those are all of the ones with just numbers. Now we're going to have some with numbers and variables. So we have to continue using all of the stuff that we've used before. So to start with, we have 4 times 1, which is 4 on the outside. Square root 6 times 6 is 36. Remember, we add our exponents back from unit 6. So 2 plus 1 gives us n to the third. So 36 is a perfect square, so that can drop to a 6. Remember, there's a formal way and kind of an informal way to look at the square root of 3, or n to the third. So you ask yourself, how many times does 2 go into 3? That would be once with 1 left over. So you would have an n on the outside and an n on the inside. Then we would have 24 for our actual number. So that's our final answer. Now, if you do it the formal way, you would leave the 4, square root of 36, and then remember you do the even number, 1 below the odd number. So n squared, and then you have your square root of n. So this becomes a 6, that becomes just an n. You do your exponent divided by 2. Number 6, our outside numbers give us negative 15. Square root 20 times 15 gives us 300. X times x, 1 plus 1, gives us x squared. So I'll go ahead and do the formal way. We have the negative 15. The biggest perfect square that goes into 300 is 100. And then 3 would be left. 2 is an even number, so it just comes down as x squared. Square root of 100 is 10. So negative 15 times 10 is negative 150. 2 divided by 2 is just 1, so just an x, and then your square root of 3. Number 7, our outside numbers would be 2 and 1, so just a 2. Square root 15 and 3 is 45. We add our exponents to get w to the 7th. So we have 2, 45 would get broken into 9 times 5. So our two square roots need to be a 9 and a 5. W to the 6th and just w. So again, you go take 1 away from your exponent if it's odd, so that way you get your even exponent. Square root of 9 is 3. 2 times 3 gives us 6. This 6 you divide by 2 to get w to the 3rd. So you take half of your exponent to take the square root of it, and then our square root of 5w comes along. Number 8 is very similar. 7 times negative 2 is negative 14. Square root 12 times 6 gives us 72. 3 plus, remember there's a 1 there to get a to the 4th. So negative 14. 36 is our biggest perfect square. 36 times 2. 4 is already an even exponent, so a to the 4th. Square root of 36 is 6. Negative 14 times 6 gives us negative 84. We do 4 divided by 2 to get us a squared, and then the square root of 2. These last two, notice there are addition and subtraction signs, so it says, watch out for the order of operations. You have to multiply before you can add or subtract. And remember, in order to add or subtract, you have to have the exact same thing underneath the square root sign. So if we look at number 9, first we have to do our multiplication. 10 times 3 is 30, square root of 20. So 20 and 5 don't match, so you might think you don't have to put them together, but you need to break down 20. 4 is our perfect square that goes into 20. Square root of 4 is 2. So 30 times 2 is 60, square root of 5, and then minus 6, square root of 5. So you need to simplify this entire left-hand part until you can get down to the square root of 5, and then you are able to subtract. So our final answer is then 54, square root of 5. So again, when you add or subtract, your underneath numbers need to match, and then you just combine your coefficients. When you have variables with exponents, those also have to match. So your underneath numbers have to match, and your exponents with, or your variables with the exponents have to match as well. So this one is already simplified, so we need to multiply these two together. So you should know we need an x to the 3rd on the outside, and we need a 6 on the inside in order to put them together. So let's see how this works. 12 times 2 is 24. Add your exponents to get x to the 6th. I'm going to write it over this way. 4 is the perfect square that goes into 24 with 6 left over. And then our x to the 6th comes along. So this does become 2x to the 3rd square root of 6. So square root of 4 is 2. Remember, we divide that by 2 is how we get x to the 3rd. Then we have 7x to the 3rd square root of 6 plus that. If you don't need to rewrite that over, that's fine. So our final answer, when you put those two together, you just get 9x to the 3rd. You don't change your exponent, only the coefficient, and then the square root of 6 for your final answer. So you can multiply the outside numbers, keep it on the outside, multiply the inside numbers, keep it under the square root. Then you need to simplify the number underneath the square root.